Okay, and then number 4 was last week. And so this is the first 2-weeker that we're doing. And so we're going to do this again. But I wonder if anybody remembers last week. So you did great with the first 3. Okay, Lucy, I heard it right through Chris is kind of going Phil Road, Sabbath. But Lucy, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Right? Okay, so I got a couple of review notes for this for anybody who wasn't here last week. Just go up with the review. Remember the Sabbath day. So there's 5 words that I want you to remember in this sentence, well, in the whole thing. And this is, again, just review purposes and for anybody who wasn't here. So you'll know that we covered this in week 1. The first word is remember. How many people are forgetful? Okay, me too. And obviously the Israelites were too, because no other commandment talks about this. But he's like, guys, remember this. And we talked about the fact that remember had 2 facets to it. Number 1, it was supposed to be instituted. So if you have an iPhone, if you have an Android, whatever you have, put it in your calendar. Put it on your to-do list. That's what it means, to mark it. It's not just, I think I'll just try to remember. It's like, no, you get to Costco, you have the 4 things, you can remember 3, you can't remember the 4th. That's why you write it down. So that's what this means. Remember, mark it, block it. And then the second part of the meaning of this word is to mention it. It's this whole idea when you go to the store, don't let me forget. Or you're going to visit the people. Don't let me forget to mention, to them. And so you're telling somebody else so that they can kind of jump in with you. The second word is Sabbath. And a lot of people think that Sabbath means Saturday, and it does not mean Saturday. It means to stop your work. We talked about the days of the week. They could literally be called Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Stop. We could change the name of the day to stop. Because it doesn't mean Saturday. In Jewish culture, it meant Saturday. For us, it sort of means Sunday. But it means to stop or cease your work. So it doesn't necessarily mean all work. We'll get to that in a minute, but it means to stop your work. So in this moment, this is no work emails, this is no work phone calls, this is no work attention. This is you unplugging from all of whatever you consider your work. And that's a huge thing. We'll get to that on number 4. Number 3 is holy. Holy. And in Hebrew culture, the word here is set apart for God's purposes. Holy. So your day should be set apart. So, 6 days look the same, essentially, but on the 7th day should look different. It should look different, and it should be for God's purposes. And then the 4th word here is your. You are free to work at what you desire. We'll talk about it in a second with context. The Israelites had 400 years of slavery. They didn't have a choice in the matter. God is giving them freedom and saying, you can do what you want. If you're gifted to be a carpenter, then be a carpenter. If you're gifted to be a stonemason, if you're gifted to be in kids' work, whatever you're gifted to do, that's what you want to do. And nothing worse, right, than you have this big vision or you want to do this great thing and then you're working in a factory and you're just like, I wasn't made for this. I was made for something else. And so God is saying, no, you're free to do what you desire. And then the 5th piece of the review is the fact that the precedent is in creation, not into creation, but the precedent is in creation because God says that God rested on the 7th day. So God is leading us in this, and it gives this idea that all of creation follows this pattern because it's created in God. It's blessed of God. And so when you fight against it, and we all know people who want to work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day or whatever it is, and they get burnt out. They find themselves with nervous breakdowns. They find themselves struggling. Why? Because they're working too much. That's not the way God designed it to be. 6 days shall you work, and on the 7th day, take a break. Take a break. Okay? So let's go on to the next quick review, and I'll do this quick. But number 1 is the context. The Israelites were 400 years enslaved in Egypt. They were working 24/7. And they were working not for their God, they were working for the Egyptian gods, because they were building and doing all the bidding of the pharaohs and all of those people. And then God miraculously freed them from their slavery. And that's why when he says to them, 6 days shall you do your work. They're like, this is awesome. We get to do what we want to do. We don't have to do what the Egyptians are telling us to do. And we don't have to serve those gods and be forced to do it from sun up to sundown in the blistering sun. We can take a break. We can decide how this goes. There's no whip coming down on us. And so for us, we read these commandments as these old-timey, passé rules and regulations. The Israelites were dying for something. And when they got this, it's like, I'm the Lord your God, and you can do your work. I am giving you autonomy. I am giving you freedom that they had never experienced before. But I want you to work 6 days, and I want you to rest one. Give one back to me. And then, again, we talked about this, the creation connection, where it says on the seventh day he rested from all his work. And again, it's this idea that in the rhythms of the world, if you try to plant, beans or whatever in the middle of winter, are they going to grow? No, they're not. Why? Because you're supposed to plant in the spring. If you try to harvest in the spring, but you never plant it, well, is that going to work? No, because that's just not the way nature works. But if you plant in the spring and you let the summertime, everything germinate and grow and then harvest in the fall, that's the way it works. And that's the way we do it. And that's the way God designed it. And so if we try to do it in any other order, it doesn't work. It's the same with rest. And we have a culture out there who are burning themselves at both ends, and they're trying to get ahead, and they're trying to do all those things, and they're fighting against what God created in the first place. And he demonstrated it. And then we had the controversy. We talked about this as well, because sure as shooting, somebody would come up to me after, we're not supposed to worship on Sundays anyways. We'll get to that a little bit more today, but we talked about it, that in, I think it was 321, Constantine instituted legally what was considered the Lord's Day. It was the day that Christian believers actually celebrated the risen Jesus. Saturday was already taken. They needed another day, so they picked Sunday. But then in the course of time, the population of the world was about 50% Christian. Constantine sort of had this connection with Christianity, and then so he, by law, mandated the switch, and we went from this Jewish calendar to a more Christian calendar, and that's when that started. And so there's all this controversy, and in fact, denominations have been birthed out of this idea that, hey, we should be worshiping on Saturday and not Sunday, because Sabbath means Saturday, right? We've already talked about that. Sabbath does not mean Saturday. Sabbath means stop. Sabbath means stop. A little bit of a review just to catch you up there. So let's read the text, and then we will zip through just a couple of things biblically. And then really what today is about, guys, is just practical. Because you're sitting there going, well, then what does it mean? What do I do? Like, I need some help here. And so that's, hopefully by the end of today, you have all you need to get through that. So let's read the text, Exodus 20, verse 8. It says, remember, and I got all the words emphasized here. So remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. So don't forget to stop and set a day apart for God's purposes. Okay, that's my rendition. You have 6 days each. And so you have 6 days each week. Oh, by the way, can I just digress here? A while ago, some people said, hey, let's change the 7 because it's kind of awkward. Let's change it to 10 days. Let's put 10 days in a week. It didn't last very long. It didn't work because you know what? God created all this. Anyways, just digressing there. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath day, a stopping day, a ceasing day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. Let's go to the next one. This includes you. You know, everybody's like, do as I say, not as I do, because this does, it includes you. And probably if you're, the parent in the household, however this looks, there is an opportunity for leadership here for sure. This includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. God instituted this. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. So, biblically, I want to just give a little bit of context, and we could spend weeks on this. So I'm just going to give you a couple of high points. Number one, biblically, is the story of Jeremiah. So here's the deal. If we want to give the context, 400 years in 400 years in slavery, and then God miraculously comes and frees them. And when they're free to do whatever they want. God says, do your work, 6 days. This is you. You're autonomous. I bought your freedom. You are now my people, and you can do what you like. And they're just like, this is incredible. They were just, they would have been celebrating. So then, of course, they wandered for 40 years, go into the promised land, and then after they get into the promised land, they establish a pretty incredible kingdom. And then throughout the course of time, they leave God behind. And they start to serve other gods. Leaving Sabbath behind. That was one of the big things. And so Jeremiah said, no. Do not leave the Sabbath behind, or you're going to pay for it. Jeremiah 17:27. I won't put it on the screen, but you just read that for yourselves. And then what ends up happening is the children of Israel, and in fact, Israel proper, is taken over. All right, so we know the Assyrians came and the Babylonians came, and then the Israelites were exiled to Babylon for, 70 years. Why? Because God was saying, you didn't observe the Sabbath, and that was the entire reason why they were taken into exile. He was like giving them a little slap upside the head. So you can understand, again, contextually early on, how, after 400 years of slavery, this would have been so good. 6 days? And then we get a day off? What is a day off? I don't even know what that is. Well, we could go to the beach. What's a beach? I thought we just lived on the beach. There was just no water. Egypt. That was a joke. Instead of making bricks out of this stuff, why don't we just lay down and listen to some music and have a cold drink? Rest. So they did that originally, and then they went into the promised land, they set up the kingdom, they were observing these things, and then they stopped observing them, and God said, no, you're going to pay if you don't give me back my day. If you're going to just work 7 days a week, you're not going to acknowledge me at all, then you're going to give me back my day. So, forward from there, when they got back to Israelite, well, do you think that they emphasized this? Of course they did. And so, in the New Testament, when Jesus arrives on the scene, one of the big ones is like, don't mess with the Sabbath, man. We don't want to be taken over again. Don't mess with the Sabbath. And then you have Jesus, interestingly, is accused multiple times of just doing what he should not be doing on the Sabbath. So Jesus, I think it's 7 different miracles that he performs on the Sabbath. He heals the sick. He heals the man with the withered hand. He restores sight to a man born blind in Jerusalem, which is pretty cool. He heals a lame man by the pool of Bethesda in John 5. He heals a crippled woman and a man with dropsy in Luke 13. And so the Pharisees keep on busting his chops about this. They're like, dude, this is not going to go well. If we mess up on the Sabbath, it's not going to go well. We have to adhere to this. And so what we're encountering there was this idea of legalism. Legalism. So we're not doing it because we love God. We're just doing it because we don't want to get in trouble again. And then one time, Mark 2, Jesus and his disciples were hungry. They were walking around, and they were picking heads of grain to eat while walking through a field. And so we have that scripture here for you in Mark 2. And it says, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples walked along. They began to pick some heads of grain. And the Pharisees said to him, look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? He answered, have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need in the days of Abiathar the high priest? He entered the house of God and he ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Go to the next one. And then he said to them, and this is so key, guys. This is so key. It's going to help us with the next scripture we're going to read. Then he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for Sabbath. Going back to the design in creation, the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Okay? Not all of that might land for you, but it's this idea that Jesus is not just only giving Old Testament precedent, but he's also saying, this idea about Sabbath, be careful not to make it a legalistic issue. If it's too legalistic, you're going to miss the point. It's almost as bad as forgetting it altogether. And then so then the church is established, Jesus dies and rises again, the church is established in the area, and then Colossians 2:16, Paul actually gives some more teaching. He says, therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or everybody say it, Sabbath day. And check it out. He actually gives what Jesus was talking about a little more clarity. These are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. So in Christ, what Paul is saying here is it really doesn't matter the day specifically like it was for the Israelites. What Jesus has come to do is give us freedom back to kind of like where God said, this is your work. You do your work. And so, of course, I love this because people in this room, you work shift work. People in this room, you work seasonally. And so sometimes you're just like, well, I can't do Sunday. I can't do Saturday. You go to a culture and you got to work when it's work time. And so the principle of Sabbath is not thrown away. The principle of Sabbath is understood both in past and creation, but also that this was actually for us to remember who Jesus was. All of these laws are a shadow. They tell us who God is, and they tell us about God's plan and the fact that God had a plan. God had a plan all along. Okay. So I get this is a little different. I'm just giving you Bible teaching. No stories. Yep. But it's important for us to understand this. And so the idea here is that the principle of Sabbath is so important to us spiritually in terms of honoring God with our lives, but it's so important for us in our mental health. It's so important for our family health. It's so important for our physical health. In every way, God has built this into the DNA of who we are, and we can worship God, and we can serve our family, and we can have healthy minds and bodies when we just observe this one commandment. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, that the commands, we think they're this checklist that we do for God, and God's saying, no, I'm telling you how to live your life. And if you are going to follow these rules and these laws, it's going to go well with you. If we get to Deuteronomy, he says, do all this, it'll go well with you. Don't do this, it will not go well with you. And so if you're going to just not observe God on any day of the week, if you're going to not, it's just going to work 24/7, there's going to be trouble. Okay, so all of that to say what we're going to get to here, which is the point. And the point is, let's get practical. Okay, let's say that. Let's get practical. Let's try one more time. Let's get practical. There we go. Okay, so I got 6 things, 6 ways, 6 steps. But before we get there, Rose. Let's read the quote. And I took this from a book called The Emotionally Healthy Leader by a guy named Peter Scazzaro. And he has this definition of Sabbath, which I think is helpful. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's okay with Paul, it's okay with Jesus, it's okay with Jeremiah and Daniel, all of those guys. He says, Sabbath is a 24-hour block of time in which we stop work, Sabbath, enjoy rest, practice delight, and contemplate God. It's set apart for God's purposes. It's holy. We're remembering the Sabbath. We're stopping and we're setting it apart for the purposes of God. He also says in this chapter on Sabbath, Sabbath is a time when we embrace our limits. Because at the end of the day, it's really like, well, I have to do this. If I don't do it, nobody else will. And if I don't do this, then everything's going to fall apart. And so we have this idea that it really all rests on us. And God's like, no, it doesn't. What did you do to make spring come this year? If anybody in this room could do something about it, we would have done it a month ago. But nobody did anything about it. Why? Because it's all in God's hands anyways. So why do we fight against this? Why do we try to think that it really is us? Oh, I'll be okay. I'm going to work 12 hours a day. It's going to be fine. No, we all have limits. Know your limit, play within it. That just came to my mind. Sabbath is a time when we embrace our limits. We let go of the illusion that we are indispensable for the running of the world. We recognize that we will never finish all of our goals, our projects, and that God is on the throne. We talked about this last week. When we get to this point, like for me, it's hard for me to get here, like in terms of my rhythms sometimes, which it was hard for the Israelites. So I think I'm in good company. But when I do this, and I did this week very specifically because I knew I was preaching this message, I'm just like, I love this. I actually love this. I said it to you guys last week. I don't know if it landed, but it's like, imagine you were forced to take a day off every week. And you'd be like, is that possible? Because right now, we don't do that. We just schedule everything in, do this, do that, and it's just and life just becomes a blur. And so with this, we're recognizing that God is on the throne. Okay, here's the 6 steps. So write these down. I think these would be really practical and really helpful. So 6 steps to remember the Sabbath day and to keep it holy. Number 1 is to clock and mark a 24-hour period. So for me, I've clocked and marked Friday at 5 p.m., which is kind of cool because it goes in line with what the Jewish culture was. But Friday at 5, when I close my door here, I don't mean to sound crass or anything, but I don't think about you guys for 24 hours. Right? I'm not thinking about my sermon. I'm not doing PowerPoint. I'm not just kind of fixing some financial this or that or whatever. I'm just like, no, I need to stop my work. Right? So this is clocked and marked. It's a 24 hours. So I have it on my calendar, and I get a notification. Hey, Sabbath is coming up, and it's 24 hours, 5 from Friday till Saturday. Somebody has said that this is a date. You're setting a date with God. Essentially, what you're doing, you're just setting a date with God. I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people where if it doesn't get on the calendar, it doesn't get done. And it's like, oh, we got to do the thing, but we never arranged for it. And then it's like 6 months later, and it's still not done. And so the idea is, if it's on the calendar, at least you're going to feel guilty for 24 hours. That was a joke again. It's like, I know it's on there, but I still want to do the thing. So you got to clock it and mark it. This goes back to the idea of remember. Remember, it was about calendar, and it was about mentioning it. So you can tell your family, you can tell your friends, you can tell your co-workers. It's like, this is my Sabbath. I'm on break. What are we going to do for Sabbath? Okay, so clock it and mark a 24-hour period. Number 1. Number 2 is mark the beginning. So in Jewish culture, for those people who are Orthodox, they will light a candle. That's the significance. The reason being is because their day starts at dusk. Where our day starts at sunrise, their day starts at dusk. And so they're saying it's the beginning of a new day. We're going to light a candle when it's dark. So not always is it dark because, in the summertime it's light. But they light a candle to mark the beginning of Shabbat, which they call Shabbat. And that's where we're going to cease from here on out. There's usually a moment of silence. There's a moment of prayer. There's a moment of quick reflection. But that is the beginning point, and until we get 24 hours later, we are basically untethered. We're on break. So you got to clock it and mark it, and then you got to mark the beginning, and then you have to stop your work. So last week we had a blast because afterwards everybody's like, "Well, I'm not cooking. I'm not there. I'm off. I'm on Sabbath, right?" And so everybody was like, just hands off the wheel. And all that stuff. Like some stuff needs to get done. George mentioned in terms of agriculture. Like what do you do? Jeff, you're the same, right? Like you got to milk cows, you got to feed animals. Like if you have animals, you still got to do that. Well, is that the same? If you read through all the Levitical laws and get into the nitty gritty, God made allowances for this because those things had to be done, right? So the minimal has to still be done. It's about stopping your work. So what is your life's work? What are you obsessing about? What are you stressed out about? What are you, kind of locked in on? It's about kind of stepping back and just giving some space to that. And when I think about this, I think about that great analogy in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And there's 2 men who got to chop down a tree. And the guy just goes to town on the tree, and he will not stop. But this guy, every once in a while, stops and he sharpens his axe. And sure enough, he gets the tree down long before the other guy. Why? Because the other guy's axe goes dull, because he's just given her all he's got and doesn't take time to sharpen his axe. When we stop, we're taking time to sharpen our axe. We're taking our foot off the gas pedal. Our nervous system can kind of come down to a baseline, right? We can kind of collect our thoughts. We feel this sense of peace. We recognize God is on the throne. All of those things are so healthy, but it only happens if we stop our work. And, and then number 4 is enjoy rest. So Sabbath is actually a gift to receive. A lot of people like, hey, when I was a kid, no hockey on Sundays? No, I was kind of hockey. I didn't like that one. No hockey? Are you kidding me? No hockey. Yeah, because hockey's evil? What? I don't know. I don't get that. But my parents, and then the one time I told you the story, the one time where my parents were away, and me and my buddy went out and was like, well, my parents won't know, so we'll just go out and play some road hockey. And then I went off for a slap shot, and we had a garage, and there were 2 lights on either side of the garage, and wouldn't you know it, God directed that ball to hit that light and just smash it to smithereens. And so my parents got home, and they're like, what happened to the light? Nothing? A squirrel? I don't know. So be sure your sin will find you out. In that way, even though my parents were theologically incorrect, I'd just leave it with them. But it is a gift to receive. And so if you position it as, hey, you get the day off, as opposed to, I have to do this, because God doesn't want us to be legalistic about it. But this is your full license to sleep in. If that's your jam, sleep in. If your jam is, I love getting up in the morning and going out on the back deck with my cup of coffee and I never get a chance to do that, then that's your jam, right? It's this idea where you're enjoying God. It's this idea of sleeping in or taking a nap in the middle of the day. It's when you've stopped and you've made space to actually enjoy your life. Remember, in Egypt, they were human doings. Only after they got God's law, they were human beings. And so God is calling us to be human beings in this way. Just go at a slower pace. Smell the roses. Go for a walk. All of those things. Okay, you with me? So encouraging. So clock it and mark the beginning, stop your work, enjoy your rest, and then I love this one, practice delight. So what is it that fills you? Is it fishing? Luke, can I get a witness? Right? You get out on the water, is it canoeing, is it paddling? Like what is it when you just get out there and you're just like, oh, thank the Lord. I love to go for hikes. Just get out there and you're just like, at the beginning of it, you're just kind of like, okay, this is this, but at the end, you're like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. And like for me, I love playing guitar. And so if I could just say, for 24 hours, I just play guitar. Hello. That would be amazing. I'm practicing delight. And this is where some of you people had said, I'm going to stop cooking because I'm on break. And we did allude to that last week, so I kind of led you there. Here's the deal. I think that on Sabbath, it should be the best meal of the week. I think that's when you buy the steak. That's when you buy the salmon. That's when you invite people over and you just elevate everything. And it's like, we're just going to eat like kings today because we're going to do it different. We're setting this day apart to be holy. And so it's not Doritos and, popcorn, or whatever, hot dogs. Oh, well, I don't know, throw in a frozen pizza. No, it's like, today's a special day. If you've got kids in the room, it's like, today's a special day. We're all going to gather together. We're going to make homemade pizzas. We're going to do something special. Why? Sabbath. We're going to mention it. We're going to do it different. Today's a different day. We're going to honor God. We're going to be together. We're going to enjoy our time. Although, if you did make pizzas, I can remember some very domestic issues when we tried to make homemade pizzas at my house. So maybe that's not delightful. I don't know. You do you. But it's this idea of just taking time to practice delight. So whatever it is that you love to do. And here's the beauty of this, is that it avoids the trap of being legalistic,
which if you're of any age, and certainly my older age, when I couldn't play hockey on Sunday, like I remember going to a pastor's house. I was in youth group. We went to the pastor's house and he had a pool table. And of course, at that time, like pool, I was like, wow, this is awesome. And there was like 4 or 5 of us, and we're just gonna, have this amazing time of pool. This was after church. However, we couldn't start till sundown. And this was like July or something. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So church was over at 7. We're here now, and we got to just sit around on our thumbs, waiting for the sun to go down because we can't play pool before the sun goes down. I'm like, this is bonkers, guys. Like, let's enjoy our time together. I digress. I might be a little bitter about that. I'll have to bring that up for the Lord later on. So we have to avoid legalism. This isn't, again, like Paul said, this isn't about pointing fingers and going, oh, well, they don't know about it. They don't do Sabbath. I don't know. I guess I can't talk to them. I don't know. Whatever it is. It's really about you. And it's really about having grace in it. And I think that Jesus gave us a good example of that with the picking of the heads of grain. And then the 6th one is this, and we can't miss this either. It's contemplating God. It's giving this. So when you're out on the boat and you're fishing, you pause and hey, Holy Spirit, just make me mindful of creation. Make me mindful of the water. Make me mindful of what's going on here. If you're out for a hike, you're doing that. If you're, playing music, or if you're just, even listening to music or whatever, it's just like you're just kind of in the mode where you're open to God. And got to be honest, when you are 6 days a week and you're going stem to stern, is your mind open for God? No, because you got to do what you got to do. That's not a bad thing. I mean, God can speak at any time, but this is a deliberate time where you're contemplating God and you're opening yourself up to what God has for you. Okay, so those are the 6 things. Clock it and mark it. Mark the beginning. Hey, I'm on break. Stop all of your work. Enjoy the rest. Practice something. Practice delight, and then contemplate God. Hebrews 4:9 says this, and then I got one story and we'll close. It says, there remains then a Sabbath rest for the people of God, for anyone who enters God's rest also rests from their works, just as God did from his. This is saying exactly what we've been saying all morning, and then here it is. This is the emphatic. This is Paul saying, hey guys, we got to do this. Remember, this is the early church. They were all Jewish for the most part, and they would all adhere to the Sabbath rules. And so he says, let us therefore make every effort to enter that rest so that no one will perish by following their example of disobedience. So there's a great principle there. Now, here's the point that we're kind of missing. And when I was doing my Lenten series, when I was doing Lent and I was doing the devotionals for Lent, something came up to me, and I'd never heard this before. But I believe this to be a principle that we should all take away as we go forward observing this Sabbath day. And it's this idea of the Passover Haggadah. And I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but I'm doing my best. It describes Sabbath as the lived enactment of the Messianic age. When I thought about this, I thought, that is so cool. Do you know when Jesus comes and sets up his kingdom? Well, we're going to be working, aren't we? Right? Read Revelation, read all the stories about all the stuff about heaven. That we're going to be working for the Lord, but he's going to be in charge. He's going to be running the show, except everything's going to be at peace. Everything is going to be in accordance with his plan and his purposes, and what a day that will be. That heavenly reward, and that's what they're talking about here. This is Sabbath as the lived enactment of the Messianic age, when we enjoy a foretaste of the coming world of peace, which we are striving, and which striving and conflict are temporarily at an end, and all creation sing a song of being to its creator. Can you imagine heaven? It's basically saying Sabbath, if you do it right, is basically like a little hors d'oeuvre of heaven. It's a little hors d'oeuvre of heaven. So if you can take it, you can bring people in, have a nice meal, you start it, you practice some delight, you go for a hike, you get out on the water, you do your thing. It's almost like, hey, we're living in heaven. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the promise that we have that Jesus paid the price for and paved the way for, that we will be in heaven one day with him. Anticipating the resurrection of Jesus, celebrating the Messianic age, and participating in his kingdom come. What does this mean in practice? How may I hear today as creation sings a song of being to its creator? Perhaps by taking a walk and truly appreciate the astounding beauty of the natural world, or by really celebrating the presence of a loved one, or by enjoying a delicious meal, by activating my soul in worship at church, or through a playlist. You know, this one piece about connecting with a loved one, what a gift. You know, for those of you who are parents in the room, and you got the kids, and it's always, oh, not now, or I'm busy, or I got to do, or we just can't, and sorry, we'll do it later, I promise. Well, you institute Sabbath, and all of a sudden you're face to face. It's like, what do you want to talk about? Let's engage. Work is not in my purview. Nothing else is in my purview. You are my priority in this moment. I mean, what a beautiful moment where you kind of like, I don't have to worry about anything. All I want to do is just be with my child. And this could be your spouse, right? Sometimes spouses are like ships in the night. Like, we never connect. We haven't connected in 20 years. Well, what if there was a Sabbath? You know, Carolyn and I, we figured this out by default because now we're empty nesters. And on Saturday mornings, we would get up, and I would get up a little bit earlier, and I'd be kind of doing my thing and have a cup of coffee or whatever, and then Carolyn would come out, and she'd have a cup of tea, and all of a sudden we'd just sit there. We'd just be there. Wouldn't be any kids, no mangy kids, you know, bugging us, right? Or no activity. There'd be no and we would just be hanging out, and all of a sudden we were just like, hey, we should do this intentionally. And so we do it intentionally, where we just sit down and how was your week? What happened for you? How can I support you? And then I get a chance to share and all of that kind of stuff. But it became a specific time where we would go through all that, and then we'd have time of prayer together. We'd just be like, hey, oh God, that's our day. Yeah, I got to do this, I got to do that. And it was just this little window that we didn't have. If we didn't do it intentionally, we wouldn't have it. So just one last paragraph here. The Haggadah also describes the Sabbath as a day of peace, which striving and conflict are at an end. How wonderful would it be if today could be like that? No striving, no stress, no conflict, no anxiety, simply a day of living and giving peace. And so I think ahead to the coming day. And I think about our day today. So we all started this with the idea of Chick-fil-A, right? Remember that last week? Chick-fil-A, and I dropped in, for those of you, I dropped in on Chick-fil-A on Sunday. It was closed. And I was like, I want a sandwich. How come I can't get a sandwich? And really, it was about a decision that they made, and it's game changing. And they give away billions of dollars every year. Why? Because of their commitment to the Sabbath, commitment to take a 24-hour block of time and say, "This is for God. I'm dedicating this to God. I'm dedicating this to God, and I'm going to be the benefactor. I don't care about the $1 billion. I'm going to be the benefactor because I'll be connected to God." And then we talked about this drug company in a pharmacy in Calgary in 1985 that came along, and they just said, hey, we want to sell stuff on Saturday, or we want to sell stuff on Sunday. The Day of the Lord Act was put in place in 1906, and they came along and they said, we want to overturn this because we want to sell shampoo on a Sunday. And so it was overturned. And the point I made is the point I'm making here. You might feel like this is an uphill battle. You might feel like this is overwhelming. I can't do it. My boss is always calling me. Work is always stressful. I don't know if I can do this. And I look at that little tiny drugstore in Calgary that actually changed the law for the nation. And we're living in that wake of that today. They had no influence other than the fact that they wanted to sell shampoo on a Sunday. And I connect that back to all of us, you know, in the grand scheme of things, are small players. But we can decide to honor the Lord. We can decide to honor the Lord with the Sabbath. We can take in the fact that, hey, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. We can honor the Lord with our Sabbath. I don't care about anybody else. I don't care about culture. I know what God expects of me, and I know how I'm supposed to be connected. I'm supposed to live in Him. I'm going to honor God with my Sabbath. And then the beauty of that is the ripple effect that will be from generation to
generation to generation, and what will happen as we begin to honor the Lord in the Sabbath. He's going to honor us, that's for sure, because we're following his commands. Amen? Let me pray for us.